Good morning. Oh my goodness, this hat. Oh, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you are in this world. God bless you. This is Gloria White coming to you from Utah, USA. Today we're going to be continuing in the complete Apocrypha in the book of Jasher, and we'll read chapter 79 tonight. And in those days Moses was feeding the flock of Reuel the Midianite, his father-in-law, beyond the wilderness of Sin. And the stick which he took from his father-in-law was in his hand. And it came to pass one day that a kid of goats strayed from the flock. And Moses pursued it, and it came to the mountain of God, to Horeb. And when he came to Horeb, the Lord appeared there unto him in the bush. And he found the bush burning with fire, but the fire had no power over the bush to consume it. And Moses was greatly astonished at this sight, why the bush was not consumed. And he approached to see this mighty thing. And the Lord called unto Moses out of the fire, and commanded him to go down to Egypt, to Pharaoh king of Egypt, to send the children of Israel from his service. And the Lord said unto Moses, Go, return to Egypt, for all the men who sought your life are dead. And you will speak unto Pharaoh to send out the children of Israel from his land. And the Lord commanded him to do signs and wonders in Egypt, before the eyes of Pharaoh and the eyes of his subjects, in order that they might believe that the Lord had sent him. And Moses hearkened to all that the Lord had commanded him. And he returned to his father-in-law, and told him the thing. And Reuel said to him, Go in peace. And Moses rose up to go to Egypt, and he took his wife and sons with him. And he was at an inn in the road, and an angel of God came down and sought an occasion against him. And he wished to kill him on account of his firstborn son, because he had not circumcised him, and had transgressed the covenant which the Lord had made with Abraham. For Moses had hearkened to the words of his father-in-law, which he had spoken to him, not to circumcise his firstborn son. Therefore he circumcised him not. Sorry, my Bible was falling over. And Zipporah saw the angel of the Lord seeking an occasion against Moses, and she knew that this thing was owing to him not having circumcised his son Gershom. And Zipporah hastened and took of the sharp rock stones that were there, and she circumcised her son, and delivered her husband and her son from the hand of the angel of the Lord. And Aaron the son of Amram, the brother of Moses, was in Egypt, walking at the riverside on that day. And the Lord appeared to him in that place, and he said to him, Go now toward Moses in the wilderness. And he went and met him in the mountain of God, and he kissed him. And Aaron lifted up his eyes and saw Zipporah, the wife of Moses, and her children. And he said unto Moses, Who are these unto you? And Moses said unto him, They are my wife and sons, which God gave me in Midian. And the thing grieved Aaron on account of the woman and her children. And Aaron said to Moses, Send away the woman and her children, that they may go to her father's house. And Moses hearkened to the words of Aaron, and did so. And Zipporah returned with her children, and they went to the house of Reuel, and remained there until the time arrived when the Lord had visited his people, and brought them out from Egypt, from the land of Pharaoh, and from the hand of Pharaoh. And Moses and Aaron came to Egypt, to the community of the children of Israel, and they spoke to them all the words of the Lord. And the people rejoiced exceedingly, great rejoicing. And Moses and Aaron rose up early on the next day, and they went to the house of Pharaoh, and they took in their hands the stick of God. And when they came to the king's gate, 2 young lions were confined there with iron instruments, and no person went out or came in from before them, unless those whom the king ordered to come. When the conjurers came and withdrew the lions by their incantations, and this brought them to the king. And Moses hasted and lifted up the stick upon the lions, and he loosed them. And Moses and Aaron came into the king's house. The lions also came with them in joy, and they followed them and rejoiced as a dog rejoices over his master when he comes from the field. And when Pharaoh saw this thing, he was astonished at it, and he was greatly terrified at the report, for their appearance was like the appearance of the children of God. And Pharaoh said to Moses, "What do you require?" And they answered him, saying, "The Lord God of the Hebrews has sent us to you to say, 'Send out my people that they may serve me.'" And when Pharaoh heard their words, he was greatly terrified before them, and he said to them, "Go today and come back to me tomorrow." And they did according to the word of the king. And when they had gone, Pharaoh sent for Balaam the magician, and to James, and to Jannes and Jambres his sons, and to all the magicians and conjurers and counselors which belonged to the king. And they all came and sat before the king. And the king told them all the words which Moses and his brother Aaron had spoken to him. And the magician said to the king, "But how did the men come to you with the lions which were confined at the gate?" And the king said, "Because they lifted up their rod against the lions and loosed them, and came to me, and the lions also rejoiced at them as a dog rejoices to meet his master." And Balaam the son of Beor the magician answered the king, saying, "These are none else than magicians like ourselves. Now therefore send for them, and let them come, and we will try them." And the king did so. And in the morning Pharaoh sent for Moses and Aaron to come before the king, and they took the rod of God, and came to the king and spoke to him, saying, "Thus said the Lord God of the Hebrews, Send my people that they may serve me." And the king said to them, "But who will believe you that you are the messengers of God, and that you come to me by his order?" Now therefore, give a wonder or a sign in this matter, and then the words which you speak will be believed. And Aaron hastened and threw the rod out of his hand before Pharaoh and before his servants, and the rod turned into a serpent. And the sorcerers saw this, and they cast each man his rod upon the ground, and they became serpents. And the serpent of Aaron's rod lifted up its head and opened its mouth to swallow the rods of the magicians. And Balaam the magician answered and said, "This thing has been from the days of old, that a serpent should swallow its fellow, and that living things devour each other. Now therefore restore it to a rod that it was at first, and we will also restore our rods as they were at first. And if your rod will swallow our rods, then we will know that the Spirit of God is in you, and if not, you are only a craftsman like unto ourselves." And Aaron hastened and stretched out his hand and caught hold of the serpent's tail, and it became a rod in his hand. And the sorcerers did the like with their rods. And they took hold, each man of the tail of his serpent, and they became rods as at first. And when they were restored to rods, the rod of Aaron swallowed up their rods. And when the king saw this, he ordered the book of records that related to the kings of Egypt to be brought. And they brought the books of records, and the chronicles of the kings of Egypt, in which all the idols of Egypt were inscribed, for they thought of finding therein the name of Jehovah, but they found it not. And Pharaoh said to Moses and Aaron, "Behold, I have found not the name of your God written in this book, and his name I know not." Excuse me 1 second. Thank you. And the counselors and wise men answered the king, "We have heard that the God of the Hebrews is the son of the wise, the son of ancient kings." And Pharaoh turned it to Moses and Aaron and said to them, "I know not the Lord whom you have declared, neither will I send his people." And they answered and said to the king, "The Lord God of gods is his name, and he proclaimed his name over us from the days of our ancestors, and sent us, saying, Go to Pharaoh and say unto him, Send my people that they may serve me. Now therefore send us, that we may take a journey for 3 days in the wilderness, and there make sacrifice to him. For from the days of our going down to Egypt, he has not taken from our hands either burnt offering, oblation, or sacrifice. And if you will not send us, His anger will be kindled against you, and he will smite Egypt, either with the plague or with the sword. And Pharaoh said to them, Tell me now his power and his might. And they said to him, He created the heaven and the earth, the seas and all their fishes. He formed the light, created the darkness, caused rain upon the earth and watered it, and made the herbage and grass to sprout. He created man and beast and the animals of the forest, the birds of the air and the fish of the sea. And by his mouth they live and die. Surely he created you in your mother's womb, and put into you the breath of life, and reared you and placed you upon the royal throne of Egypt. And he will take your breath and soul from you, and return you to the ground from where you were taken. And the anger of the king was kindled at their words. And he said to them, But who among all the gods of the nations can do this? My river is mine own, and I have made it for myself. And he drove them from him, and he ordered the labor upon Israel to be more severe than it was yesterday and before. And Moses and Aaron went out from the king's presence. And they saw the children of Israel in an evil condition, for the taskmasters had made their labor exceedingly heavy. And Moses returned to the Lord and said, Why have you mistreated your people? For since I came to speak to Pharaoh, the reason you sent me, he has exceedingly mistreated the children of Israel. And the Lord said to Moses, Behold, you will see that, with an outstretched hand and heavy plagues, Pharaoh will send the children of Israel from his land. And Moses and Aaron dwelt among their brethren, the children of Israel, in Egypt. And as for the children of Israel, the Egyptians embittered their lives with the heavy work which they imposed upon them. Chapter 80, anybody? Let's keep going. And at the end of 2 years, the Lord again sent Moses to Pharaoh to bring out the children of Israel and to send them out of the land of Egypt. And Moses went and came to the house of Pharaoh, and he spoke to him the words of the Lord who had sent him. But Pharaoh would not hearken to the voice of the Lord, and God roused his might in Egypt upon Pharaoh and his subjects. And God smote Pharaoh and his people with a very great and sore plagues. And the Lord sent by the hand of Aaron, and turned all the waters of Egypt into blood, and all their streams and rivers. And when an Egyptian came to drink and draw water, he looked into his pitcher, and behold, all the water was turned into blood. And when he came to drink from his cup, the water in the cup became blood. And when a woman kneaded her dough and cooked her victuals, their appearance was turned to that of blood. And the Lord sent again and caused all their waters to bring out frogs. And all the frogs came into the house of the Egyptians. And when the Egyptians drank, their bellies were filled with frogs, and they danced in their bellies, as they dance when in the river. And all their drinking water and cooking water turned to frogs, as when they lay in their beds, their perspiration bred frogs. Oof. Notwithstanding all this, the anger of the Lord did not turn from them, and his hand was stretched out against all the Egyptians to smite them with every heavy plague. And he sent and smote their dust to lice, and the lice became in Egypt to the height of 2 cubits upon the earth. The lice were also very numerous in the flesh of man and beast, in all the inhabitants of Egypt. Also upon the king and queen the Lord sent the lice, and it grieved Egypt exceedingly on account of the lice. Notwithstanding this, the anger of the Lord did not turn away, and his hand was still stretched out over Egypt. And the Lord sent all kinds of beasts of the field into Egypt, and they came and destroyed all Egypt, man and beast and trees, and all things that were in Egypt. And the Lord sent fiery serpents, scorpions, mice, weasels, toads, together with others creeping in dust, flies, hornets, fleas, bugs, and gnats, each swarm according to its kind. And all reptiles and winged animals according to their kind came to Egypt and grieved the Egyptians exceedingly. And the fleas and flies came into the eyes and ears of the Egyptians, And the hornet came upon them and drove them away. And they removed from it into their inner rooms, and it pursued them. And when the Egyptians hid themselves on account of the swarm of animals, they locked their doors after them. And God ordered the Shuanuth, which was in the sea, to come up and go into Egypt. And she had long arms, 10 cubits in length of the cubit of a man. And she went upon the roofs, and uncovered the rafters and flooring, and cut them, and stretched out her arm into the house, and removed the lock and bolt, and opened the houses of Egypt. Afterward came the swarm of animals into the houses of Egypt, and the swarm of animals destroyed the Egyptians, and it grieved them exceedingly. Notwithstanding this, the anger of the Lord did not turn away from the Egyptians, and his hand was yet stretched out against them. And God sent the pestilence, and the pestilence prevailed in Egypt, in the horses and asses, and in the camels, in herds of oxen and sheep, and in man. And when the Egyptians rose up early in the morning to take their cattle to pasture, they found all their cattle dead. And there remained of the cattle of the Egyptians only 1 in 10, and of the cattle belonging to Israel and Goshen, not one died. And God sent a burning inflammation in the flesh of the Egyptians, which burst their skins, and it became a severe itch in all the Egyptians, from the soles of their feet to the crowns of their heads. And many boils were in their flesh, and their flesh wasted away until they became rotten and putrid. Notwithstanding this, the anger of the Lord did not turn away, and his hand was still stretched out over all Egypt. And the Lord sent a very heavy hail, which smote their vines and broke their fruit trees, and dried them up, and they fell upon them. Also every green herb became dry and perished, for a mingling fire descended amidst the hail. Therefore the hail and the fire consumed all things. Also men and beasts that were found abroad perished of the flames of fire and of the hail, and of all the young lions were exhausted. And the Lord sent and brought numerous locusts into Egypt, the chassel, the Shalom, the Cargol, and the Cargil, locust, each of its kind, which devoured all of the hail which devoured all that the hail had left remaining. Then the Egyptians rejoiced at the locust, although they consumed the produce of the field. They caught them in abundance and salted them for food. And the Lord turned a mighty wind of the sea, which took away all the locusts, even those that were salted, and thrust them into the Red Sea. Not one locust remained within the boundaries of Egypt. And God sent darkness upon Egypt, that the whole land of Egypt and Pathros became dark for 3 days, so that a man could not see his hand when he lifted it to his mouth. At that time died many of the people of Israel who had rebelled against the Lord, and who would not hearken to Moses and Aaron, and believed not in them that God had sent them, and who had said, "We will not go out from Egypt, lest we perish with hunger in a desolate wilderness," and who would not hearken to the voice of Moses. The Lord started taking those guys, the non-believers, out of the way. And the Lord plagued them in the 3 days of darkness, and the Israelites buried them in those days, without the Egyptians knowing of them or rejoicing over them. And the darkness was very great in Egypt for 3 days, and any person who was standing when the darkness came remained standing in his place, and he that was sitting remained sitting, and he that was lying continued lying in the same state, and he that was walking remained sitting upon the ground in the same spot. And this thing happened to all the Egyptians, until the darkness had passed away. And the days of darkness passed away, and the Lord sent Moses and Aaron to the children of Israel, saying, "Celebrate your feast and make your Passover. For behold, I come in the midst of the night among all the Egyptians, and I will smite all their firstborn, from the firstborn of a man to the firstborn of a beast. And when I see your Passover, I will pass over you. And the children of Israel did according to all that the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. Thus did they in that night. And it came to pass in the middle of the night that the Lord went out in the midst of Egypt, and smote all the firstborn of the Egyptians, from the firstborn of man to the firstborn of beast. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry throughout Egypt in that night, for there was not a house in which there was not a corpse. Also the likenesses of the firstborn of Egypt, which were carved in the walls of their houses, were destroyed and fell to the ground. Even the bones of their firstborn who had died before them, this, and whom they had buried in their houses, they raked up by the dogs of Egypt on that night, and dragged before the Egyptians, and cast before them. And all the Egyptians saw this evil which had suddenly come upon them. And all the Egyptians cried out with a loud voice. And all the families of Egypt wept upon that night, each man for his son and each man for his daughter, being the firstborn. And the tumult of Egypt was heard at a distance on that night. And Bathia, the daughter of Pharaoh, went out with the king on that night to seek Moses and Aaron in their houses. And they found them in their houses, eating and drinking and rejoicing with all Israel. And Bathia said to Moses, Is this the reward for the good which I have done to you? Who have reared you and stretched you out, and you have brought this evil upon me and my father's house. And Moses said to her, Surely 10 plagues did the Lord bring upon Egypt. Did any evil accrue to you from any of them? Did one of them affect you? She said, No. And Moses said to her, Although you are the firstborn to your mother, you will not die, and no evil will reach you in the midst of Egypt. And she said, What advantage is it to me, when I see the king, my brother, and all his household and subjects in this evil, whose firstborn perish with all the firstborn of Egypt? And Moses said to her, Surely your brother and his household and subjects, the families of Egypt, would not hearken to the words of the Lord. Therefore did this evil come upon them. And Pharaoh, king of Egypt, approached Moses and Aaron, and some of the children of Israel who were with them in that place. And he prayed to them, saying, Rise up and take your brother and all the children of Egypt who are in the land, with their sheep and oxen and all belonging to them. They will leave nothing remaining. Only pray for me to the Lord your God. And Moses said to Pharaoh, Behold, though you are your mother's firstborn, yet fear not, for you will not die. For the Lord has commanded that you will live, in order to show you his great might and strong stretched out arm. And Pharaoh ordered the children of Israel to be sent away, and all the Egyptians strengthened themselves to send them. For they said, We are all perishing. And all the Egyptians sent the Israelites out with great riches, sheep and oxen and precious things, according to the oath of the Lord between him and our father Abraham. And the children of Israel delayed going out at night. And when the Egyptians came to them to bring them out, they said to them, Are we thieves that we should go out at night? And the children of Israel asked of the Egyptians vessels of silver and vessels of gold, and garments, and the children of Israel stripped the Egyptians. And Moses hastened and rose up and went to the river of Egypt, and brought up from there the coffin of Joseph, and took it with him. The children of Israel also brought up, each man his father's coffin with him, and each man the coffins of his tribe. The Lord is delivering them, just like he said he would. And he's going to deliver us too. You watch and see. Is there anything too hard for our God? Absolutely not. And as always, I love you.